6:33 p.m. We are calling to order the Ward 3 Neighborhood Planning Assembly meeting. I am Zachary Cummings, the facilitator for today's meeting. We have steering committee members Brooks Cummings and Daryl Fields with us. And the first motion would be, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? And there is a second. Thank you. Right. Moving into the first order of business, we have the Ward's 3 priority discussion. And this is going to be a discussion amongst the membership to figure out what goals and initiatives we want to discuss and have our city council representation represent for us amongst their duties for the upcoming year. We do have a guest who has helped put together a resolution relating to this matter. And if you would be so kind to explain the original intent of this resolution and how these discussions are being held in other NPAs before we dive into our discussion.
Sure. My name is Jonathan Chapel-Sokol. I'm in Ward 1. And I was on a committee with Chris and Lena Greenberg to put together a resolution better defining the relationship between, I assume I can be here. Better define the relationship between the NPAs and the city council, city administration, departments, and so forth. One of the outcomes of that was that every year, each ward gets to put a set of identify a set of priorities that should not be executed or voted on at city council until there's been a discussion at the appropriate NPA. And something between 3 and 5 issues. And what we did in Ward 1 was we had a meeting in which we talked about this, and then people filled in. They had the chance to fill out some paper that said, "These are my 3 priorities." We put all those together, and at the next meeting, we voted on each of the priorities that people discussed. And then the priorities with the most votes are the ones we bring forward to city council. So that's, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward process that we used. Use any process you like. But they were things like, in Ward 1, we're very concerned about the relationship between the university and the city, mostly about housing. So that was kind of the first, everybody wanted to see that. But after that, there's questions about whether it's sidewalks or whether it's changes in the parks. Any of a variety of things. There were half a dozen or a dozen things that were brought up at the meetings as things that people care about. And then we voted on it. So that's our process.
All right, so that's what we got. All right. We're probably going to have a similar process as well, because these things are going to take time to documents assetized throughout the community. But today is a really good starting off point, and this is an open air discussion, so feel free to put your hand up and raise your concerns or what you'd like to see us communicate to council representation. Any first takers? Yeah, works.
Where things stand on the OPC, and I mean, I'm unclear how far that went.
Did you not use an acronym?
Yeah, but the opioid
Overdose. Okay, thank you.
Prevention Center, harm reduction initiative. So we had a resolution where that we voted on, that we asked that it not be placed free. And to be honest with you, I don't hear so.
Okay. Right. See where that follow-up goes.
Would you like me to comment on that, or?
Actually, yeah, go ahead. We have Councilor Grant on online, and you have the floor to actually give us some follow-up on that, please. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So the process that was previously announced is continuing. The results, I'm sorry, I'm getting echoed. The results of the a resolution that was voted on by the members that were present for Ward 3 was presented to the council. So that's all I can really say at this time. This is something that is moving forward based on the description. And we don't have any locations at this time. That's the really big thing. Where there isn't, as they've been vetting locations, places aren't working out because they're being mindful of the community concerns around that. There was something online that implied that a location had been found and people hadn't been told, uh, when in fact it was just the normal reporting related to the grant that's paying for this, where they gave examples of places that they were trying to look at, but it wasn't something that had actually worked out. I will say for major votes like this that are big policy, it has been brought up before that the NPA should really promote the vote and then let people know what the date of the vote will be. Because when we have something that's a resolution where so few people participated, that can be an issue as to how influential it will be or not. Other NPAs do give more advance notice to be proactive to increase participation for particular votes. And you can see people, a lot more people will show up for a meeting so that they can have their point of view heard. So just some feedback there. Thank you. Oh, and there is still continues to be a dedicated web page on the city's website that is following everything that's being done regarding the OPC, including meetings that you might not have been able to attend in person, but can watch at your convenience. If anyone needs the link, please let me or Laura know. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other conversation on the point of the OPC or? And actually, yep.
Will we be talking about the homeless population downtown?
If you actually want to bring that up, like what concerns do you have with the homeless population down here?
I'd just like to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, if you want to talk about it, yeah. Again, this is in right now in open discussion until 7, so. Give a,
It's concerning. You?
I think as a housed person, I feel bad for the people who are not. My name is Jill Lesh, 40 College Street. Feel bad for the people who are hanging out in City Hall Park. I'm hoping that there are places for them at night, and I would like to know what the status of that is, and if there's anything we should be advocating for with the city council. That's it.
okay. Thank you.
I just want to say just one statement. I don't know when was the last time you walked down to City Hall Park, but there have been people hanging in City Hall Park for a month. So I don't know what's gonna happen when it gets warm, but there's nobody there that hangs out at City Hall Park. You're free to go sit at any time of day. It's peaceful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that's not a hot spot.
Actually, yeah, Jill.
Jill Lesh, I don't feel that I don't want to be in City Park because of this, but it's still there. It's just part of our situation right now. But I would like people to be housed if possible, for their sake, not for my sake.
It also, Darrell, you bring up a point on how there's not much people hanging out at the park right now during the daytime, but that also raises the other question of where have they moved to, and I personally haven't heard of like any new aid apparatuses that the city or the state has put together. So what is going on with the homeless population if we're not seeing them in the usual congregation areas right now?
It's like what they do in a major city, they are pushing homeless people by the spot. That's what we do there.
Yeah, may I pass the mic down, please? And just state your name.
My name is Amy Taylor. I also live at 40 College Street, and I share your concern with the homeless, but not with City Hall Park. I am extremely concerned about where they sleep. There were over 200 people sleeping outside all winter from, according to speakers I've heard, and that is extremely concerning. There was a man who died of hypothermia in Battery Park. There was another one who died of hypothermia in Battle Bove. You know, that is extremely concerning. I think that, I don't know if you saw the movie the other night, Fault Line, America's housing crisis. No, is it in Short Landing? We've been looking at legislation around housing and building housing and whatever is preventing the building of new housing for low and middle income people. I mean, there are some legislative constraints that keep builders from building multifamily in surrounding suburbs, for example. You know, I'm not familiar with the legislation, but I would like to become familiar with the legislation so we can look at what to advocate for building new housing. Right now, I think I'm going to say Chittenden County is 40,000 units behind. They need to construct that just to keep up. I mean, that doesn't even speak to the homeless population, but just to keep up with demand. So I think that's where our concern should be with the lack of housing and not just with the homeless population themselves. They're you know, you can push them underground, but they'll still be there and they'll still be sleeping outside. And that's not a good thing.
Any other comments on this particular matter?
Could I comment?
Actually, yeah, it's fitting. I was going to ask you, Counselor Grant, if you are aware of any new city or state apparatuses that may have caused or that may be related to the concern in the room right now.
Certainly. So, one of the things I just did a front porch forum post today because there's been a lot of questions about the cleanups down on the waterfront and other areas. So when you have time, if you're on front porch forum, please let me know. If you're not, just email me and I'll send you a copy of what I sent. So even though the motel program had winded down and pushed people out, there was still an allowance for cold weather shelter. There were certain rules around if people qualified, they could still get into motel rooms, and the cap was at 80 days. So while we did have a large number of people still sleeping rough, and that is down in some of the encampment areas over by like the 127 bike path, down on the waterfront, people trying to sleep in vestibules and other things like that. A lot of people sleeping in the garages. It's very interesting. I know not a lot of people would do this, but walking around at night through the garages, there's like a whole another world that's going on. The 80 days have ended for most individuals that were taking part in that plan the first week of April. So I actually anticipate that we're going to see more people in City Hall Park sooner rather than later. I was talking to Chief Burke about it. He described it as a light switch going on. So I think we will see some of the same problems. City Hall Park is a free and open park, and people are allowed to hang out there. I believe that there's a really good site in homelessnessvermont.com. And the person who runs that, and I forgive me, I don't remember her name, but I follow her in social media. She gives a lot of updates because they are working with people. They seek donations. They provide tents to people. They provide sleeping bags to people. And people who work with the various organizations that interact with that population are continuing to do the same thing when possible. The city council just this past Monday had a presentation. It was the deliberative agenda item 8, and it was talking about quote unquote the build resolution, which was a report on housing barriers and associated recommendations. In a next month or so, we're going to have another dedicated conversation about how do we look at IZ zoning. Like maybe we shouldn't look at making a certain number of units mandatory to be quote unquote affordable, because the trend across the country in many different municipalities and different size municipalities is to encourage more public private projects. So there's been a lot of talk about the South End project, for example. The first phase is going to be starting soon. So I do recommend, if you didn't have a chance to watch the meeting, to watch the conversation for that agenda item for those of you that are interested with regards to what's going on with housing. We have a really big number to meet. All the municipalities in Vermont have a big number to meet in order to catch up to where you need to be for housing. So there have been other meetings. Once again, if you email me and you just say housing updates, I'm happy to send you links for particular meetings with the timestamps of when the conversations started. It might be for future meetings having Charles Dillard come in and talk about the initiatives. And the mayor has also, if you get her emails, she's just done a big housing push. We're looking at, hey, we just did changes. Never mind what's happening at the state level. We as a city did major changes with neighborhood code, and we are seeing more housing as a result of that. But how do we really activate more, even more, based on the changes in that code? And so I'll leave it there. But there's a lot of things with housing going on, and I can definitely provide people with the meeting links.
Thank you. The conversation kind of like took a little sidetrack with talking about housing legislation and policy around that, but it still doesn't get to how we want to talk about what the present status on the homeless population. Housing is going to take another 2 to 5 years to build out, depending on the scale of each project. But what does that do for the homeless folks out on the street today? Where are they? We're not seeing them in their usual congregation spots. So is there a new care apparatus that's either privately being run or somewhere that's being done like that's publicly funded, it's not really publicized, that we're not knowing about? I think that's like a big.
No, I would say that the shelters continue to be full. Um, the encampments are there. The encampments have gotten bigger, and that is certainly an issue. I I just think with the weather being colder, when it's a nice sunny day, the park is a great place to hang out. If it's raining and the temperature's too cold, people are looking for places inside. And that could be, I mean, I keep going to the garages just because I've seen a lot of that activity at the garages. And as a counselor, I have gotten a lot of complaints with people dealing with people sleeping in their backyards, vacant properties. That's often a way I find out about vacant properties is people complain about people squatting on vacant properties. And then that's a call to permit and inspections to touch base with the land owners, the property owners to make sure that they're securing their properties. So it they're there. They're there. And I think as the weather gets better, they will see. And people are still walking around downtown. It's still there. We need the state to do more. We need the state to do more. We need more towns to have shelters. We have more people coming to Burlington because they literally can't get shelter where they live. I was on a meeting, I think I mentioned it before, where the police chief in Shelburne said he needed better options than getting somebody a taxi ride to Burlington City Hall Park. And everybody in the meeting chuckled. It wasn't funny, but he was saying, in his area, they don't have the resources. And it continues to be for housing advocates. It's months wait now. And just to get someone to talk to you to help you navigate getting what little affordable housing might become available.
I was going to say, another kind of priority, to be honest with you, thank you, Mark and Milo, but it would be nice for, other counselors to be part of our NPA, but to a certain degree, sit and listen. I think there's a lot of, value in having people, not every question has to be answered, right? We're trying to come up with a list of a priority and stuff like that, but it would be great to see, for example, the mayor is a Ward 3 resident, right? And we're only meeting once a month, and I know everybody's busy, but, and if there are out of this list, if there are particular things, whether it's housing or et cetera, then we can reach out to, like we did for today's, right? We're reaching out to property taxes and tax assessments and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot to be said with the face-to-face, just sitting back and kind of listening to what's going on. Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
Mike. Pass it down.
I have a small voice, so the folks would never hear me. I'm mostly concerned about us coming up with a list of priorities when there are so few of us. And it's very hard to get, if you're not in the downtown front porch forum, to get information about this meeting. There's no signage out front. There's nothing. So and excuse me, I'm Donna Bister. I live on Peru Street. So I think whatever process we have to come up with what our priorities are for city council, they cannot be from this face-to-face meeting. It's not representative of the community that we are.
And I find it to add on to that, I find, like we had a pretty good showing. I want to say it was because of the OPC, I forgot, we had like a room of people, there were like 20 people, but I find that if it's something that I think my neighbors and friends would be involved with, I have to do quite a bit of campaigning, for lack of a better term, to get people like, this is really, don't you have some questions about this? We have, the subject matter experts here, you can pepper them with questions and they're ready, willing, and capable of answering that kind of stuff. So, but I agree, I think for whatever reason, we seem to be challenged for participation versus other boards. I guess the pizza is.
Well, I don't think
ideal.
we do very much to try to inform people. I mean, I'm only here because I happen to, I'm not on the downtown front porch forum, I'm on the old end forum. And I just happened to look at the downtown forum today and said, oh, I thought that meeting was last week. And I can't ever come on the first Wednesday because I have a conflict. So here I am, never to be seen again.
That's a good point, because I think the steering committee puts conscious effort into making what's on the agenda relevant for folks. So, but I agree with you, it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, let's pass this all the way down.
Stuck.
Hi there. I'm Dawn Ellis. I have a history of serving our communities in a variety of elected and appointed ways. And so I'm absolutely dedicated to, how can we take the fact that we have government and optimize it to be working for us all for the best, and for me, that means I'm always doing a lot of listening. And one thing I have been doing is listening on this very topic in the Ward 3 area at a variety of different hours, day and night, recently. And I wonder if in the room we have any knowledge about efforts that have sought to help people who have housing disruptions connect with kin or chosen friend supports, both on the side of, there's a spectrum of housing disruption. You may be fine and housed and something happens, like your job goes away, and there may be supports in the city, but if it doesn't all piece together, it can quickly flip. And often first, first call are the people who care the most about you. And that's different for different people. And some may have those people locally within walking distance, and some may have those people within the radius of a bus transportation, and some may have those people, further afield, both within the state and without the state. But that tends to be off the radar from what I'm hearing is collected in the way we conceive of how do we help people who have housing disruptions. Like that there's a social network and a set of people that care about a person who's disrupted, who may or may not be empowered or more empowered to help ease that disruption. And I'm wondering about policies that have sought to get resources right into that space before you fall out completely, while you get back on your feet. Because it can be quite a burden that can spread or just not work out, where the friend's couch might work for a month, but come month 2, it's hard. But with a little more help, it could be the month 2, 3 through the cold season, where you start to get mail and you get back on your feet and you make it through without ever having to be fully within the world of, now we are working with someone who's considered without housing altogether. And so I'm thinking about that middle space that is ripe for simple interventions, resources that are simple, because complicated means time, and time is money. Time is effort. Time is goodwill. Time is person on feed or not on feed. And that seems to be one of the things that's challenging, is if it takes lots of time to navigate lots of different programs that are partial programs, it's very, very difficult to be proactive about resetting yourself into a place of stability.
There is a volunteer by the name of Nancy Harkin who works with COTS. I forget the name of the program, but it's to locate family. And she has had some success. The last time I talked to her, she had located 5 family members that were willing to help. There is a program out there.
Okay, unless there are any other points to be added for the priorities discussion, we'll be moving along to our next item, the Bove Restaurant Redevelopment Project on Pearl Street. And we have Rick Bove himself here to present. Right there, that shot right here.
We should open up 2 chairs on the corner there.
I can come around.
Try to get on.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to this NPA. And I'm here tonight just to briefly discuss our proposal for the Bove's Restaurant site on Pearl Street. As you know, it's been a challenge the last 10 years since we've closed. And through discussions with my mom and my brother, Mark, we think we've come up with a really nice addition to Burlington. As many of you probably are aware, the restaurant, one of the things the restaurant was known for is its affordability. And we'd like to continue that theme in this building, meaning we're not sure yet whether it could be a 4-story building, it could be all the way up to a 6-story building, based on some bonuses that we were made aware of. But we're trying to create approximately 25 efficiencies in the building with a commercial component on the first floor as the zoning requires. These efficiencies would be between the sizes of 425 square feet to up to 500 square feet. And the architect has done what we feel is a great job taking some feedback from us, and having been a patron of the restaurant for many decades himself, took a couple cues from the restaurant and incorporated them into this new rendering. We are, in today's dollars, what we're trying to do in terms of affordability is we're thinking along the lines of $1,395 for an efficiency, which includes everything: Wi-Fi, cable, heat, electric, water. Everything is included in that price. So that's where we're at. As I was speaking of prior, the 4-story building could just be an administrative approval under the form-based code that is in this section of town. We do not need to go to Act 250. So as long as we check all the boxes on the form, we could start. One thing that people, when I hear about us not caring about the restaurant site and why we haven't taken it down up until this point, is in the city of Burlington, if you're dealing with a historic structure, which the restaurant is, even though it looks the way it does today, it is a historic structure. In order to tear a historic structure down, you need to have a plan, an approved plan in place, ready to go. That's the only way the city will allow demolition of a historic structure. Along with, we have had the UVM Historic Society. They did a report and they deemed that it would be okay to demolish the restaurant. It's always tough for me to say stuff like that because our grandmother Victoria, who started the restaurant on Pearl Harbor Day, it's one thing to destroy something that you've created. It's something to take down something that someone else has created. So, excuse me. Now I'm off train. Well, anyway, the Historic Society at UVM said, as long as we are replacing the restaurant with something that is of use to the community, then they would be okay with demolition. And so housing falls under that category in this day and time. So let me just show you briefly what John Alden from Scott and Partners has come up with. And I'll rotate this. Oh, yeah, well, I will. Yeah. And one of the cues that I had spoken of prior for people who frequented the restaurant, there's a couple windows at the front that were six-sided, I guess. And so unfortunately, we've had to board them up over the years, but the architect took that cue and brought it to the commercial space here on the first floor. And I was taken back by, we've shown this to a few folks, and their eyes always go to that window and they say, "Oh, I recognize that window." And so that kind of made us feel good. The architect was also trying to create a Art Deco-ish type building. And because of course the restaurant, that's what it was known for. And I think he's done an admirable job, especially in the front there, to create that. So this rendering, this elevation is showing 6 stories. So again, if we need to do some cost analysis, 4 versus the 6. The Victoria Place next door is 4 stories. The building on the corner of North Champlain and Pearl is 6 stories. And it needs to be affordable to gain those bonuses. And I'm sure we're meeting that criteria because we're 100% affordable. They're all going to be based on that rent.
Is it 25?
Approximately 20, 6 story for the 25. Yes. The building is only a little over 15,000 square feet, but we're dealing with a very small footprint for the restaurant. This is only on our property. This is not on the city parking lot. This is just on where the restaurant stood. So where we lack in square footage area wise, we're trying to make it up by going up. So that's where we're at right now. And this is the first step, as everyone is aware. And we just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention and garner some feedback.
What are next steps? What are your next steps?
Well, the next steps would be to have the architect go full bore, and with his him and the civil engineer, but just to do all of his plans for all the systems in the building, how they would connect to the utilities on the road, and how they could meet all the fire standards, all that stuff. So that's where I would call John and say, "John, we got very nice feedback last night, and let's keep going."
30th.
Well, yes, it's been a process.
Yeah.
It's been a process. So, but we'd like to again, with the cost analysis, we'd like to go 6 stories because the architect put all the windows of the apartments facing west. So all the corridors are just facing the road going into the parking lot. So everyone's going to have just a really wonderful view of the Adirondacks and sunsets and things of that nature. I thought that was a smart move on his part.
You do have a parking lot?
Well, in this zone, we don't need any parking. Parking is not required in this zone of the city. There is, as you know, the municipal parking lot. Back when we were proposing a hotel pre-COVID, Sato did a internal analysis, and they deemed that this was the most underutilized parking lot in the city of Burlington. And I think one of the reasons is because you just don't see it. People just drive by. So no, there won't be any parking for the residents. They could park in the municipal parking lot, but we're going to score very well on the walkability and the bikeability. And as you're aware, the bus station is just like a half a block.
So that parking lot behind it is for the other bit.
No, it's for the community.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's,
Yep. There are meters back there, or maybe not meters anymore, but those, that system that the city has.
You have a question you want to ask?
what the other, with the microcar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Walk down to them.
You guys, man.
You.
My name is Evan. So I guess my question for Mr. Bove is why can't you just renovate the current property?
So we had a structural engineer. It renovated.
So you should give him the microphone back.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you asking to renovate into the restaurant again or into housing?
You can go right up and sit right beside it. Thank you.
either one.
Okay. We had a structural engineer come in, and according to him, the restaurant, it's pre-1900. It's in pretty bad shape. I remember when Dad would ask me to go down to the basement to check on the furnace. I was like, "Oh, please, no!" and just the stairs going down into the basement, it's scary. It's just not structurally sound to do that. Yep.
Just as there was an article about you that Bill Ward, the code enforcement director, basically said that that property was a problem property. It's been vacant for
10
the
years.
past 10 years. I kind of question why that's necessary when there's people who could be living there possibly, or,
Or
I'll give you another example. So there was another problem property on Church Street that the code enforcement director basically took away the rental permit, and the landlord sold the building to a developer who is now in the process of renovating the house. Like, that's turning things around, I think. But I don't know, that's just my take on it, I guess.
Sure, I understand. The way the structure is currently, it could not support anything above it. And so the best use for that piece of land in that area of town, that zone, is to be able to create 25 housing units that are all up to speed as far as all the regulations, et cetera. And I think we're able to touch many more lives this way than we would be in its present form, even under renovation.
So what would your timeline be for this?
If we did just 4 stories, so that means we could have this approved administratively through the form-based code, we could potentially start around September 1st. If we go to the 6-story, 5 or 6-story version, then we have to go to the DRB. I don't know what their agenda looks like. I don't know how busy they are. But we have to have our complete plans in front of them in order for them to have a discussion with us and to get feedback from them. So that might push it into the spring of 27 at that point.
And I guess my last question is, what would be your response to tenants who basically said that the properties that you own are not maintained well, or when there's a maintenance request, there's almost no response. There's been cockroaches. I mean, specifically, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but there was a property over in Winooski, somewhere in Winooski on Main Street. What would be your response to people looking for affordable housing that the landlord just doesn't do anything?
So just yesterday, we started renovation of the Winooski property.
Okay.
Literally yesterday, we started. They're in there excavating. We're going through the whole 4 buildings. Everything's going to be brand new at that property. Since the article came out in 7 days, 4.5 years ago, at that time we had 1.5 maintenance, 1 full-time person and 1 part-time person. Since then, we now have 5 maintenance people full-time, and we also have a director of maintenance, and we also have 3 full-time property managers on board. So we've made mistakes in the past, no doubt about it. We grew too fast, and we didn't have the infrastructure or the people in place to handle that. In the past 4.5 years, we've made real concerted efforts to address those issues by hiring a lot more people. And we are committed to being the best value in Vermont as far as our rentals are concerned. Thanks.
We're almost at time, but we have room for one more question. Brooks.
Hey, so I would say that I give you credit for making this financially feasible, given that all the units are reasonably affordable. It seems like we're challenged with new construction where the new construction is kind of challenged to come up with what we call affordable, a certain percentage of affordable, and they tend to, in my uneducated view, they tend to burden the other apartments within that envelope with higher rents to offset the lack of revenue generation. So, I totally believe what you're saying. That's pretty amazing that you can make it financially float with 100% of them being, 400 or 500 square feet isn't much, but still, that's a lot. And that's a high goal to get to for sure.
Having everything.
Yeah.
We have a few other buildings that are all inclusive, and the people really enjoy living there because we've taken the guests out of their expense per month. They have a fixed thing, so they can count on that. And in this world that we live in right now, people are a little skittish, right? They don't know exactly what's happening the next day. And we're trying to make it a little more predetermined.
May we pass this down to Councilor Barlow, please?
Thank you. And I just wanted to say that I've been aware of this project. I talked with Mark and Rick about this, I don't know, a year ago or so. It's been percolating for a while. We've been encouraging them, and they've wanted to do something on the restaurant property. And, we talk about the neighborhood code and all of our issues around infill development. This is the kind of project we need to be doing more of. It's 20 units on a very small footprint or more. And so we should embrace these things. And I just wanted to thank Rick for bringing a project like this forward, because we need to encourage this kind of development. And if people like the Boves are willing to do this, we should encourage it. So that's my opinion. Others may disagree with me, but I thank you for trying to build in Burlington and make this work on this very small footprint.
Rick, do you have a closing statement?
All right. Well, actually to mirror Councilor Barlow's comments, yeah, this is actually a very important project for us because it does show that we can do affordability and infill development. So I personally, and hopefully everyone else in the room wishes you the best of luck on this. So, all right, thank you for your time for bringing us down. All right. Our next order of business is understanding our property tax bill, and we have the Chief Administrative Officer, Catherine Schad, with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to your meeting. I do not have slides, but I have handouts. I assume that my colleague Barbara is there. And so yeah.
They have been distributed.
Excellent.
We
Thank
have
you.
them.
Great. So I hope you have been perusing them. So I'm going to give a brief overview and then I am open for any questions that you may have. And then, of course, this flows very well into Jonathan's next topic. I'm also going to share my screen here. As sort of an overview, there is a very helpful resource that is available from the state. And that is not a handout that I've given you, but I'm happy to pass along the link. And that goes through each of the pieces here. And if I had known that, probably I wouldn't have had to create my own handout, but I found that after. So I'll pass this along in case that is interesting. But as we look at the top of the, it really doesn't matter which of the handouts we start with. For the front of the tax bill, one has a state payment and one does not, because we wanted to be inclusive. However, I'm just going to go through one of them, and I am, yeah, so one of the important things to note is on the left side is the city portion. That's all of the municipal side of the taxes. And on the right is the state portion. And so today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what's on the left-hand side. So at the top, you see the assessed value, and that's what Jonathan's going to talk to you about if that is something that you want to appeal, because this property value, which on this one is $337,800, is determined by the local officials. And that is something that hasn't changed since our last reappraisal. And then you see the homestead over here on the right, and that will stay, that will typically be the full amount unless you have a business or rental. And then looking down at the tax bill on the left, you see our municipal rate. And for this tax year, it's about 85.5 cents. And so you take your assessed value, you divide it by 100, and then you multiply it by that tax rate. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about what makes up that tax rate. So on this tax bill, it's about $2,900 that is going to the city. And then if you go on to the right side, you'll see that it's about $5,100 going to education. and that's going all to the state, of course. So it's a 2/3, 1/3 split. You'll notice this local agreement, which is $1.35 over the entire year. That supports the local veterans exemptions that Burlington has chosen to support. And then I think perhaps the more interesting part for our discussion is the back of the tax bill. But I'll stop and ask, do people have questions about the front of the tax bill?
I have just a quick question. So my understanding is there's through the state, I think there's an income sensitivity where if, and I don't know all the details, but there's some reduction in your property tax bill if you fit a certain demographic, for lack of a better term.
Yes, that is true. And I'm happy to send that along, and we can include that in the notes. That is handled by the state. So I don't have all the details on that, but that is true. I think it's at a very low amount. But yes, I'll send that to you. Any other questions? All right, so let's look at the back of the bill. And this shows us what is making up the municipal portion, that 1/3 of the total tax bill. And you may have noticed that there's a new format this year because we're really trying to promote this understanding. And so there's this bar chart down here at the bottom to help you see the proportion. But we talk about the municipal tax rate. But as you can see here, over the years, we have, as a community, voted for various splinter taxes. So our general city rate is only 19 cents. And we've got bike path maintenance. As you know, we've got police and fire, and all sorts of these other rates. We've got a separate street capital rate, as well as a state mandated highway rate. We've got a rate that supports our general operation of parks, as well as penny for parks, which is specific for capital investment. Two of our larger taxes, of dedicated taxes, are retirement, and that supports, of course, previous Burlington employees that have retired, and supporting our pension system, as well as debt services, and that is all of the bonding that the city has voted for over the years. And then some of the smaller taxes are the library tax, which is still an important source of new books and other collections for them. And then the housing trust tax, which was not so recently, but was increased and is an important source of, as we were talking about, increasing the housing stock in Burlington. It's a lot to take in, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have about any of these. They're all governed by their own unique set of rules. They all came into being at a different time. Some of them are in the charter. Some of them were only adopted by resolution. but they're all here because they are somehow important to Burlington, and somewhere along the way, someone thought that they were important. And I think one of the things that this mayor has been trying to start a conversation on is this is a lot of splinter taxes set at different rates, adjusting differently. And along with tax fairness, is there a way to simplify this and make it more predictable for people? So the Tax Fairness Committee is continuing to meet, and they're just at the beginning of their work. But I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that. Any questions?
Got a quick one for you. Do you see, I think I know the answer, but coming from the corporate world, pensions, I'll say are a thing of the past. That a lot of corporations converted pensions for all the wrong reasons into, will front load your 401k, and the average stock market return is spectacular and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that is our intent to continue with a pension for the foreseeable future.
Well, I also came from the corporate world before I joined the city about 6 years ago, and we work within the parameters of 4 different collective bargaining agreements. And I think we will continue to be offering pensions, but we are looking at how do we make that a more affordable prospect for taxpayers while still honoring what we've said we will do for employees, especially police and fire.
Jane, thank you.
You mentioned a moment ago that these all come with their own specific rules and whatnot. I'm wondering, of the splinter taxes, how much flexibility is there for cross-pollination between the funds? And if so, which ones are able to cross-pollinate and maybe even down the road just become one line item instead of multiple?
It's a great question. How many are currently able to is almost none of them. How many could is almost all of them. That is my honest answer. Because in so many cases, this is all essentially general fund money. And of course, we're allocating it all to different places. And so that will be a really interesting, you were talking about the priorities for this NPA and wanting to, be able to present those to the city council. It's, as we continue to sort out what are the priorities, this is the money that every person who owns property in Burlington is paying. Like, does this currently reflect our priorities? Essentially, is the big picture question here. And how do we want to allocate that? And how much flexibility do we want to have year to year?
Yeah. I'm looking at how we have like bike path maintenance, then pennies for parks, and it's another one. Oh yeah, and Parks General Fund. I'm wondering, like, that seems like it can just be one line item instead of multiple.
And also open space, because they all just go to the parks budget.
I can give you a little history on that. It's the only way that actual citizens have a real say in how money gets spent in the city budget. And most of these came about through citizen action with specific things in mind. And to take that flexibility away from the city so that they couldn't say, okay, we're not going to do sidewalks. There was almost no sidewalk repair done before we did that one, the streets one.
The concern was if we aggregate, then the
Be right back where we were.
Consumes all of the stuff that we
Exactly.
intended to be.
Exactly.
Parks.
But maybe some of these aren't as important now as they once were. Too, I wouldn't say dump it all.
I was gonna say to just simple counter. Like just and yeah, that is a great point, and it is nice that the previous forms of Burlington governance has thought of that community input. It's just that, like, let's say for 1 year, there's like, all right, we didn't have to maintain X amount of footage or mileage of bike path this year, and so we have Y amount of money left over, but it's locked over here and it can't move.
Never happens.
Never.
Not that much money.
All right. Okay. Well, honestly, okay.
Hi, it's Sarah Russell. I wondered if what the best practice is for other cities around what the mayor is trying to do in collapsing some of these. Like, have you looked at other cities who've done this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And of course, different cities do it different ways. And that is something that we are considering. And I think most cities don't have as many as we do, but it's not uncommon to have some. And so I think we will find a middle ground. And that also doesn't mean that the participatory budgeting that the woman to your left mentioned around penny for parks, that is really important. And that's something that we'd like to expand upon. How do we get, especially in the capital space, that's what the best practices say makes the most sense to have citizens more engaged. But, that also does include streets, sidewalks, things like that, some of our bigger projects, to have more direct citizen input into those budgets. I can't hear anything.
She can't hear you. Here now.
Okay, so this is Charlie, and so I see that retirement is the largest item on this list. And I'm assuming that that's going to explode in the next 10 or 20 years. So who in the city is studying how to make adjustments to the taxes in the future? Because at some point, this is going to be very unaffordable, because I'm assuming that there's going to be an explosion in the retirement line. Thank you.
It's me, and it is our director of finance who reports to me, and we have a retirement committee here at the city. There are other representatives from the community who sit on that, as well as employees. And our goal is to steward the fund well and to make sure there is enough money for people to be able to have their pensions, but also to ensure that that remains affordable. Because one of the reason why that is the largest of the bar graphs is because, as you know, if we need to increase the general city tax rate, or for instance, police and fire, as we just did, we go out for a vote and we have to ask and make our case. But you're probably now thinking, no one has ever asked me if I want an increased retirement tax. And that is because for debt service and retirement, the way that it is written in the charter is the amount of money that the city needs. That is the amount that we are allowed, I am allowed as the CAO, to charge you for taxes. So it is incumbent upon that retirement committee to take what we have been given in terms of what we owe the employees as benefits, and then to try and steward the money as well as we can, and also make recommendations if it's to limit benefits moving forward, or if it would be to move away from a pension system.
Any other questions for CAO Shad? Nothing. All right. We are a little ahead on this. Do you have any closing remarks or any additional comments?
I just would like to thank you for an engaging conversation. It's not every group that would like to talk about their property taxes, and it's not my first time with this NPA, and it's always an engaging crowd. So thank you, and I'll hope to see you guys again soon.
All right. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Oh, okay, we're on to the next item, how to appeal our property tax assessments with the one and only John Chapel-Sokol.
Thank you. And Rob Gutman. And Barbara, you can put these up, right? So this is going to be a kind of the opposite of the last one, in that there's going to be way too many words on paper for you to look at. And so it's going to be speed reading and speed talking. I got my training in making charts from working at IBM, and it was always important to convince management that you knew what you were talking about. It didn't really matter if you did or not, but you had to put a lot of stuff on charts. So I'm just vamping here until Barbara puts the chart up. This is about appealing your appraisal, and I'm Jonathan Chapel-Sokol.
I'm Rob Gutman.
And Rob and I, and a player to be named later, are the Board of Assessors. Typically, the Board of Assessors has the city assessor and two residents of the city who really are there to ensure equity, to ensure that the assessor's office is doing what they are assigned to do. You're going to see in these charts the disclaimer statement that this is really our opinions. This was not reviewed by the city. It doesn't represent the views of the city or any board or commission. It doesn't represent the Board of Assessors and no staff member, and it doesn't obligate the city in any way. This is just our perspective on the process. And this presentation is focused on residential property, but if you have questions about commercial property or rentals, we can try to answer those as well. The second slide, the next slide, is from the assessor's webpage, and it's straight off the page. And I think when this thing is posted with the minutes, you'll see that most everything that you'll find, there will be a link of some sort, so you can go to the original. But what it says on the assessor's webpage is the Office of the Assessor staff. The Office of Assessor staff may call you and or email a request for a property inspection as a result of recent improvements you made to your property. Most often, our request comes from a review of permitted improvements reviewed through OpenGov software. That's where you put in your permit request. This is the same software as permitting and inspection uses. Our office uses other means of property review, such as driving through sections of the city and sales review. These types of reviews may result in a request for inspection from our office. We had a couple other alternatives on the next chart. This is the why me chart. There's a handful of reasons, but first of all, congratulate yourself because you're a homeowner. If you got a reappraisal, it means you own a home in the city, and that's an accomplishment. Renters do not get to appeal landlord appraisals, and this is a philosophical issue, because maybe they should, because reappraisals to the landlords just flows down. So the one reason is, as it says on the city page, you may have closed permits in the past year, indicating completion of work you did, improvements you made on your home. There's publicly available information on sales, or your property does not match the records in the city that the city has. There may be an indication you have an extra bathroom, that you have a finished basement, so forth, that don't show up in the city records. It may suggest that there was unpermitted improvements done to your home, and this could have been done by the previous owner. It doesn't imply you've done anything wrong. But even if it was a previous owner, you're still responsible for paying the taxes on the assessed value of the property. The city can discover an error or inconsistency in their records that they need to correct. Schedules on permits may suggest that the work has been completed even if the permit hasn't been closed. So you may have a finished basement, but the city hasn't closed the permits yet. So the assessor's office might call you up and say, we want to see your basement. The assessor's office may reappraise an entire class of property. They can reassess all the duplexes one year, for example, or all the triplexes, or whatever. The city does not reappraise based on a home sale. So if you sell your home, the new owners don't pay higher taxes. That would be, it's not legal, and it would be unethical, because the house right next to you that could be identical is still paying based on previous appraisal, previous assessment. So that's not done. City will generally request an inspection of your property before correcting errors or changing your appraisal. So you may get a call or a note saying that they want to come look at your property. It's advisable to let them in. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a lawyer, but you're more likely to convince them that they're wrong if they see it. But it's entirely, some people don't want the assessors in their house. Some people don't care. That's up to every individual to decide. Next chart, please. What do I do if I disagree with the reappraisal? You can appeal it, and you appeal it by filing a grievance, and you actually file a grievance in the same OpenGov software that you use to do permitting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You should note that that grievances or appeals requests are due by May 14th at 4 p.m., so don't miss the deadline. One of the things about this appeals process is, in a way, it's a little bit regressive, in the sense that some people bring lawyers, for example. Some people have time during the day to come to an appeal. Some people don't. Some people have to do this by themselves. You certainly don't need a lawyer to come to the Board of Assessors. You don't. It's a very informal, it's a very casual place to talk about the issue. But if you don't have money and you don't have time, it's much harder to go and do an appeal than if you do. You can also call the assessor's office and have a conversation with the assessor, or just a staff member. Sometimes you can settle the appeal without even going to the board. You get clarification, you clarify, and it can all be taken care of without actually going to the Board of Assessors. We often find it's a significant number. Many tens of percents get closed before the appeals. So that's a great way to do it. The other way is to appear before the Board of Assessors, and this is a board of 3 people, as I said, reviews your grievance and decides if there's merit. The Board of Assessors meets annually, and it's typically the last or second to last week in May, and that's actually in the charter that it meets then. And the appeals are about 15 minutes long. They're pretty painless. Board of Assessors is focused on the fairness of your property valuation and not on your ability to pay. The ability to pay is the subject of the tax appeals boards. So if you don't agree with the outcome of the Board of Assessors, you can appeal to the Board of Tax Appeals, which is a quasi-judicial group. And they meet after taxes start being due. So it ends up being a tax abatement kind of thing, or a tax appeal. It doesn't change your appraisal for that year. It would change it for the following year if it happens. If you still don't agree, you can go to the state and their decision is final. So there's multiple paths beyond the Board of Assessors. And if you can settle at the Board of Assessors, it's probably most straightforward. One of the things about the Board of Assessors is that the city is really trying to understand if there's a problem or not. So the assessor is part of the board. The assessor doesn't act as a prosecutor. The assessor acts as a reviewer. When you go to the Board of Appeals, Board of Tax Appeals, it's the assessor presents the case, why they changed the assessment. And so you are arguing against the assessor at that point. So if you can settle at the Board of Assessors, it's always better. There are 3 outcomes to an appeal. Your appeal can be accepted. And what you'll see in the form in a few charts is that one of the things that's asked is what you think the valuation should be. So if your appeal is accepted, it means that the Board of Appeals agrees with your reasoning and the proposed valuation. What you think the house is worth. It could be modified, and there's a couple reasons to modify it. That the Board of Assessors agrees with your reasoning, but thinks that the property valuation is different from your proposal. So yes, what you say all makes sense, but we think you've exaggerated the amount of savings it should be, and we're going to adjust it to a different level. And finally, the Board of Assessors does not agree with your reasoning, but thinks there needs to be an adjustment in the valuation. So your arguments weren't really strong, but as we review this case, it does look like there's some latitude, and there's probably reasons why your assessment is a little off. And almost all the time, when it's in that case, it lowers the assessment. Okay, but it doesn't always. There are cases where when the Board of Assessors reviews the case, they say, "Oh no, we're under assessing right now," and so it's entirely possible that the number could go up. Very unusual. And then finally, your appeal can be denied. When you appeal to the Board of Assessors, you need to explain the reasons why the appraisal is unjust. Okay. And there are better reasons to do that. Like there are errors. You say I have 3 bathrooms, but I only have 1. Things like that. You say I have a finished attic, but I'm still a year away. It's still down to the rafters. There's nothing up there. You say my living room's this big, but it's only that big. So that's one thing, is errors. Another is that, and in this one, the yous are the city, not you. It's written backwards, but the city has overestimated the quality or the condition of the house, and we'll talk a little bit about those terms. I just got my house appraised by a commercial appraiser, and it's $50,000 less than what you say it is. That's a great thing if you can carry in a recent appraisal on your home. It's a wonderful thing to bring to an appeal. I wouldn't go out and spend the money on one if I didn't have one, but you're valuing something that really is intangible, and you're valuing it too high, like the view or something about the yard or something about just something that is not really tangible about the house. You're overvaluing it. Reasons that aren't as good, and we hear these often, are my appraisal's too high. It's unfair. And people will come and just say that. That's not a great reason to accept an appeal. My neighbor's house is valued lower. And again, that's not a great reason unless you have some really good arguments. And that's where the question about the quality and the condition come in, which is on the next chart. But you should also note that you can appeal your appraisal any year you want. Even if it wasn't reappraised, you can appeal your appraisal. So if you were reappraised back in 2020 when everybody else was, and you're still unhappy with it, you could bring it this year. There's no statute of limitations or anything, because this is all about equity. We're trying to make the system as fair as possible. On the next slide, this is quality and condition, and these are probably the most subjective components of an assessment. But they are assigned on the basis of standard rubrics and descriptions that the assessor's office works with to apply equitably. So they're not just words, they actually have scales and rubrics, and you could even have a notebook with pictures in it that describe quality and condition. They're on a scale from poor to excellent, maybe a poor minus to excellent plus, and they can make a significant difference in the valuation of your home. Condition is what shape your home is in. Is it newer, fresh, or is it tired and run down? And those are very vague terms, but an assessor with experience can look at 3 different houses and look at the kitchens and look at the bathrooms and just look at the walls and the woodwork and be able to put it in one of the standard fares, goods, average, whatever. And then quality is more like the bones, the structural robustness of your home, and the quality of the stuff inside the house. And the classic example is your kitchen counter Formica or is it granite? That's a quality question, not necessarily a condition question. If it's granite, but it has big pieces, big chunks out of it, then that's a condition question. On the next slide, the next slide is an eye chart, and you can read this at your leisure. But in 2022, we went and laid out all the reasons for appeals that were granted, modified, or denied. What the owner said and what the assessor said. And you can look at this at your leisure, as I say. It's small type. But it kind of shows the stuff that is important and the stuff that's less important in terms of being able to be effective in giving an appeal. The next slide is what happens at and after the meeting. And the meeting, as I said, it was about 15 minutes long. You get to state your case. You can bring supporting materials if you wish. Board members may ask questions relevant to your appeal, and decisions are not made in those 15 minutes. Decisions are made outside the appeal time. In fact, the assessor may ask if it's okay to schedule a visit to look at your property. If you say yes and you do not let the assessor in, you will probably lose the appeal. Visits are really a fantastic way to clarify property value. For examples that we saw last year and the year before is where there's a basement that's being renovated, but it's not finished yet. And people bring in bunches of pictures, and usually the photographs themselves are enough to just say, yeah, overestimated the completion of the project. But if you didn't bring in pictures, the assessor might say, can we just come down to you? And in 5 minutes, they'll say, oh, yeah, we overestimated the Douglas project. The assessor's office does a review and shares the opinion with the rest of the board. So the assessor's office usually takes these back and tries to figure out whether they should be accepted or not. And then they bring their opinions to the board as a whole. And together the board makes the decision and the appellant is notified around mid-June. So as I say, if you do this, but you want to appeal, you have to wait till after the tax bills are already written. And these are a couple of links and QR codes for the links. The first is the page that describes the appeals process, and it actually does say Board of ASSE on it. I think they ran out. And the second is the OpenGov portal where you can get to the application to file the appeal. You'll need an OpenGov permitting and licensing account. It's very easy to get. You can get it right there. The first page says sign in or get an account. And if you can't work your way through this form, just call the assessor's office and they'll help walk you through it. Because it's really important that if you think there's an injustice going on, that you let people know and that somebody looks at it and tries to figure it out. The next couple pages are the pages that actually have, there's at least 7 pages to the application, but there's only a couple that actually matter. One is page 4, which is your basis of appeal. And they ask you what the assessor's appraised value was and then what you think the appraised value should be. And then ask a couple of questions and then asks you in this little box, but I think this box gets very big if you want, to describe the basis for your appeal, why you think this is unjust. And note on this page, there's a little frustration on this page in that it asks you to fill in your parcel ID and it asks you to fill in the assessor's appraised value. They've got stars next to them. You've got to fill them in. But by this time in the application, the form already knows those things and they could just fill them in themselves. But you have to do it. So you have to go at this point. Hopefully on the first page, you will have written down your parcel ID. So you have it when you get to this page. Otherwise, you got to go back and find it. Then page 7. And page 7 is just the place where you can put in attachments. So if you don't have enough space in the little box to write what you want to write, you can put any kinds of attachments you want. And they will be looked at. The assessors will look at what you bring and use it in trying to figure out what's going on. The place you can find a lot of information about what the city thinks your home looks like is the property record card. This is a link to the property record cards, and I finished this presentation just with a couple of shots, and this is my property record card. So it's illegible from here. But what it has, you can look this over. You can go to that link and find your property if you want. It has a tremendous amount of information on it. First of all, if you go to the property database lookup, which is this link here, there's a lot of information just on the page, and then there's a lot of information about your house, and then there's a little link at the top that you can click on that takes you to your property record card. And the property record card talks about previous owners, previous assessments, how many rooms. It's got quality and condition on it. It's got special conditions on it, like if you own one of those houses that has a lake view on Lakeview, what's the name of the road?
Terrace.
Lakeview Terrace. There's a little adjustment here that says, well, we're going to up whatever it is by X% because you have the spectacular view. So it's 2 pages long. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's some stuff in here which is totally irrelevant, and that is the comparables, that they list other houses that are like it, and it's very inaccurate. They really shouldn't be in there. So you can't use that when you appeal. You can't really use those because they're wrong. It's not good data. But otherwise, there's a lot of information here that you can make good use of. And if you see something on here you don't understand it, just call the office, and somebody will help you talk through it. And with that, I've yacked. We can answer questions.
My first question is, I've spent the last couple of days looking at Burlington.gov, and today, for some reason, access is forbidden. Credentials are down. I can't look at street names. I've spent a quality last 3 or 4 days doing that very thing without problem. So that's an IT thing. So I started by looking at, and thank you for explaining the rubric. So I took where I live as an example. So we have westerly views. The building is constructed such that they're basically 1, 2, 3, 4 apartments per floor. And so the middle 2 have exactly the same square footage, every apartment. And the first one had the same square footage and the last one had the same square footage. So I just took the third, I'm in 203. And I just started doing assessed value, and I just walked up 1 floor at a time. And what I found was, and I won't mention the actual assessed value, but what I found was, the next floor was I was looking for a view tax, because we do have views depending on how far you go up. So I looked at the next floor, and they're like 11 or 12K more than mine, or be it they're starting to come through the trees and you can actually see the lake. Then the next floor was $44,000 more than the previous floor. So I'm just doing floor to floor deltas. The next floor was $28,000 more than the previous one. The next floor was $90,000 more than the next one. And then the next floor was the exact same assessed value as the floor below it. I mean, down to 800, it was I'll make up a number, 800,000 and $800. And it was the exact same number for both those units. And then the highest floor was again another 20,000 over there. So I guess I get the rubric idea, but this seems so, given that the square footage, the number of bedrooms and number of bathrooms is locked in, everybody's got 2 and 2. Now, maybe there's some real super schmancy stuff going on in there, but it seems highly variable. I'll put it that way.
I'm gonna say an anecdote, and then I'm gonna let Rob answer this question. Many years ago, somebody came to an appeal, and they were in an apartment building, could be, where it had lake views, and they were high enough up that before all the trees grew along, they had a lake view, and now they don't have a lake view, and they were appealing because they thought they were being charged for that. So yeah, this can happen. Now, maybe you can talk a little bit about it.
Well, first thing I would tell you is however we answer this question, we don't speak for the assessor's office. So their rubrics and their methodology is we're not privy to all that per se. The point you made about the difference of finishes and things in each of the units could play into it. There could be another externality that, although it would be odd, but there could be something else. It might be a question that would be really answerable by the assessor's office.
Well, I don't want to throw any of my neighbors on us. So that's what I'm being careful about. But I kind of look for consistency. I expect as you go up, the view improves, and some people are throwing money at their apartments. And so it just seems.
How old is the building? Right, so old enough so people have done renovations and some haven't. Yeah. I can't think of any other reason that there would be such variability other than there is some value to the view, but it should be consistent, you would think. Any other questions?
So limited sample, the few people I know that have appealed have not been successful. And they receive a letter, and this, I haven't seen the letter, to be honest with you, but it was, how do I say, a bit curt. So that what,
Is this recent?
22.
Okay. So I've actually been on the Board of Assessors for a number of years, and when I joined, the letters were awful. I mean, they were awful, and it made me sad. And this is what I think that's what resident members are supposed to be there for. We talked a lot about it. This is with the appraiser, the assessor before the last assessor. We talked a lot about this, and we talked a lot about civil, basically you can be official, but you don't have to be mean. And they improved a lot. Like, for example, those two modified categories used to be denied with modification. Now they're just modified. So that the tone was all much more, we worked very hard to make the tone more positive, but we have work to do, obviously. It's hard to get all the explanations. It's hard to get all the explanations in a letter and make it in a way that doesn't sound curt. And that's what I think we see it's just unfortunate because this matters a lot to the receiver of the letter. And the senders are sending out hundreds of these potentially. So we still need to work on it for sure.
Yeah, the last math I did this year, it was when I actually had, so it used to be I could look and see how, it used to be there was a portal where I could see not just the assessed value, but what the previous owners and what the taxes were being paid currently and all that. And that seemed to disappear somewhere, but neither that you're here nor there. I went through for our building and went through every single unit, and our building that's got 30 homes in it was at that point just under $500,000 in property tax. So it makes a big deal to a lot of people because as taxes go up and up and up, it's very expensive. And it seems like everything is kind of down to the assessment, right? We all agree on the percentage of tax per $1,000 of money.
And everybody pays the same, right? Yeah. There was.
It's exactly that. The assessment is what makes it fair and equitable. And that's the goal of a good assessment. And that's why it's important to do this work.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we definitely see, I mean, there are, the taxing is done by a totally different group. The assessment is it's really all about equity. It's fairness from unit to unit, site to site, building to building. It's got to be fair or else it just won't work well. One interesting thing, and let's say now you appealed your assessment, okay? And the Board of Assessors said, yeah, it kind of makes sense. We're going to drop you by X. Better yet, those two apartments that are the same, that are assessed identically, right?
Yeah.
One goes and the assessors say, well, they really don't have a view anymore, or whatever, and changes that one. True equity would be to tell every single person in that building to appeal next year, because there's something structurally wrong with the way the appeal is. You can't really do that, but it's very hard when you've got a bunch of things that are very similar. When one appeals, the right thing to do is to go and talk to everybody about it. There's not really a process to do that.
And I think it's an interesting turn on. So if I had neighbors or whoever that wanted to improve, it isn't clear to me their understanding of the implications. So I'm gonna put cabinetry in, and I'm gonna put $200,000 worth of wonderful stuff in. Okay, get ready, buckle up, because the assessor is going to come through at some frequency, whether it's a total reassessment every 10 years or whatever it is. And if you let him in the front door, you're going to pay. Likely.
That's equity. That's what equity is. If somebody's living a better life, they should kick in a little bit more of the system. They owe the city a little bit.
Because, so that's a conceptual discussion about inside finishes, and because they can afford or chose to do it, whether they can afford it or not, they are, I don't say penalized, but they are paying more towards city taxes or whatever. Yeah, I get a new garage or whatever, adding space and stuff, but I want to replace my countertop. Oh.
Well, it kind of comes in on the back end when if they were to ever to sell their home, or if they pass away and there's a thing on the step up tax basis and whatnot, they eventually pay. Everyone eventually pays. It's just when.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. That was 4 minutes. Yeah. Actually.
On that, knowing that a majority of city residents are renters, where do you see the relationship with a appraisal happening into, essentially, let's take the most recent citywide reappraisal. Did the assessor's office observe a change after the property reappraisals into the renter's market? Because if the property owner has to pay more in tax, and seemingly depending on how shrewd a property owner is, they'll be raising someone's rent every of $50 to $100 per month every other year or whatnot when property taxes go through and whatnot. So is there do you see a relationship between reappraisals and the renter's market?
So, and I'll probably let you do some of this too, because I'm going to stumble a little bit, but when you get out of home ownership, residential, single family kind of stuff, whether it's condos or owner occupied, then very often the assessment is done, or the appraisal is done based on it's income based. So it's based on how much money does the property make? And that's what you're taxed on, rather than what the sale price of the building would be. So it's a little different in an appraisal. What you do with property that earns money compared to property you live in. There's kind of the cost base, which is kind of the way these things build up. Is you got a bedroom, you got 3 bedrooms, you got 1 bathroom, you got this, you got that. You kind of add it all up. It's in a nice neighborhood. You just add it all up, and that's how you get your valuation. If it's a rental property or a commercial property, is how much money does it make? So the rental property appeals are typically somebody coming in, and they have to give you what they charge for their apartments, how much they pay for oil or heat or electricity or whatever, and that needs to fall into some sort of a range. It's not uncommon, especially for owner-occupied duplex people or folks who just have a duplex that they rent out, that they're charging way below market rates on rent, and then they should be paying less taxes. So it's because it's income-based rather than cost-based. It's different. It just comes out a little differently. That doesn't mean that the renters don't get screwed anyways, but it is a little different.
So intuitively, these reasons, because that just costs me the taxes. They should have something. I do math to see that.
But yeah, it's just that like as a renter, yeah, I'm not saying like the tax bill or whatnot, but I am paying for it.
Absolutely.
So it's just like, would it be within? Now, this is not, again, these conversations do not represent the opinions of the city or anything, but like, would it be within the interest of landlords to actually devaluate their property and or their rents to maybe like better suit the market and make their rents more appealing? To find a way to devalue their property on your end and not my end as a end consumer of said property.
Actually, I don't think that works. I think the revenue from the rent far outweighs this tax saving for the property.
Yeah, all
There's a small percentage versus cash in my pocket.
Yeah, this is a super theoretical subject, so.
Let's try
Well, we gotta think outside the box in this particular market, so. But yeah,
Yeah, I would love to see that. I think this would be very complicated, but if you live in a building, if you rent in a building where there are 10 residents and there's a reappraisal, if you get 6 of those residents together, you should be able to appeal. Something like that,
Yeah.
that the renters as a class could appeal, even if the landlord doesn't.
So one common misconception that I see a lot of homeowners hold is that just because your assessment goes up means your taxes go up.
Well, that's correct.
They're two kind of unrelated but related pieces of the equation. So just because your assessment goes up doesn't mean your rent needs to go up. It could, based on the assessment of every other property in the city relative to yours.
okay.
It seems like there's a statement, but it seems like if there is if there's a disproportionate value increase, like I forgot what it was, like lakefront property got reassessed and those went way up, or a particular class or whatever, it goes way up because of the market or for some reason, like this is highly desirable and this stuff is not so much. So it doesn't appear to be across the board. It's very more surgical than that about, this selection. And then it is the grand list and whatever, right? I mean, you're not going to, like what you said, it's just a percentage of your assessed value. And if your value went up disproportionately to somebody else, you could be paying more taxes, but it's not because the value went up. It seems like disproportionately it went up. It's magic, I know.
One of the things that we didn't talk about is that there's 2 pieces to a home assessment, and one is the value of the building, the improvement, and the other is the value of the land. And if you're living in an apartment or a condo, you don't have any land, but there's still this underlying value. Is it downtown or is it at the northernmost part of the New North End? And then the city's divided up into these neighborhoods. The assessor's office has created a bunch of neighborhoods. And the Lakeview Terrace example is a great one because there's one neighborhood on all the houses that are facing the lake. And then there's another neighborhood, which is all the houses that don't face the lake, that are across the street. And their land values are very different. And the other thing is that as you have the land valuation isn't linear. You double the land value doesn't necessarily double the valuation.
Double the land.
You double the land, you don't necessarily double the land value. It kind of curves over. So the different, nobody has there are very few acre properties in the city. But if you go from 1 acre to 1.1 acres, the difference is much less than if you go from 0.1 to 0.2. Just because, it stops being that, it's just like the back 40 or something when you have a big property. But that's, appraising the land is very different from appraising the improvement. When you have an apartment building, it's all improvement. It's all what's going on inside there, when you look out the window.
Okay. What time are we at right now?
8:24.
Oh, okay. Jonathan and Robert, thank you very much for spending your evening with us and going over the appeals process. We're going to go to the next bit of public forum. So if we have any comments from anyone likely to share.
I got mine in already.
Okay, all right, so yes. Yeah.
I was just saying, I think you guys are doing a great job with agendas. I'm finding it very informative and inner working, making sausage about how this thing works and you know what I mean, where all the money's going and who's spending. And I like the bar graphs that, I'm sorry for the name, but the CAO
shot.
Yeah, put together, because that tends to, not that we can affect it, but that's a really good visual on where we're spending our money. Big bars are, I won't say bad, but worth considering.
Actually, Councilor Grant, you weren't agendized for a council update, but we do have a few minutes in public forum if you may want to speak to any happenings you see in the city.
Sure, thank you. Just a reminder, I hear when people say they'd like to see the mayor more often at our NPAs. Sometimes that's just not possible given her schedule. She does continue to do the meetups on a consistent time. The next Central District meetup will be May 12th. And once a week, there's a meetup throughout the city if the Central District doesn't work. It starts at 5:30 and it is virtual. There's 2 remote options and there's 3 in-person options. One is hybrid. The budget process has been continuing. Each year the mayor has pushed it up earlier given the amount of time needed to address the gap. The presentations are going to be starting I believe next week. I actually have to update my calendar, but when you go to the city's website, click on agenda. Also, Town Meeting TV will be recording these, but the agenda will state on which day the budget hearing is going to be held and which departments will be presenting for people that want to follow along. I will be doing an attachment of the last Public Safety Committee meeting, which included Sarah George. I can't remember if I know I mentioned she was coming and was going to be talking about the accountability court. It was extremely interesting when she talked about the results in terms of literally hundreds of cases being able to resolve And for the first time since COVID, our SA state's attorneys have reasonable caseloads. The accountability court itself is now moved to Rutland. That's still good for Burlington because we do have some people that travel to different municipalities. So they actually have open cases in multiple municipalities. So if they get cases cleared up in the Rutland court, that will continue to help us as well. In Burlington, they are going to under the accountability court that was set up. If someone had 5 open cases, they could move them. They're going to be doing, if someone gets 3 open cases, they're going to move them. And because there's been such a huge pressure lifted up, it's going to make things easier for them. I think this is really important. I think this is a game changer, and I do encourage people to watch that and listen to the rest of the information that she provided, in addition to data from the chiefs. And we also had an update from the street outreach team. And the last thing I want to say is Laura Sanchez Parkinson, the new Ward 3 city councilor, was sworn in last week. Her email address is now live and posted on the website. Would kind of from a discussion earlier about what we could do to be more proactive about promoting the meetings. It would be really important. I can kind of change things on the fly. My kid is grown out the door. Laura has a young family, so she really needs to have notifications as soon as possible to confirm the dates of the meetings, because she does want to be here. Tonight she had pre-schedule. It was like a school event for her kids. So she has 2 younger children that are school age. So that's going to affect her schedule for meetings, in addition to all the budget meetings we have coming up. And that's all I've got. Thank you so much for the time.
All right. Well, thank you for the update. And that brings us right to the end of the meeting. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming to the Ward 3 NPA.
One thing, you have a second, you're supposed to have a vote.
Oh, is there a vote to end the meeting?
Okay.